This story happened to my mother in 1985 when she was 18 years old. She had been out at a nightclub with one of her friends, and after they had a few drinks, they decided to make their way home, so they started walking. It was around 1 AM when they made their way onto a dark and deserted country road. Suddenly, they see a car driving past them. They figured it was kind of weird for someone to be out driving at this time of night on this type of road, but they didn't think much of it. Once it passed them, they expected it to continue driving down the road, but it suddenly stopped a little bit ahead of them. My mother and her friend instantly froze in terror. They didn't know what was going to happen. They thought that they were going to get kidnapped if they walked past the car. Seeing as the car had no lights on, it was impossible for my mother and her friend to see whoever was in it. For all they knew, there could have been more than one person in the car. They stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes, looking to see whether the car would move or not. She even claimed that she saw the car slightly reversing, but she can't verify that. At some point, the car drove away into the darkness, and my mother made it back to her house, and her friend to hers, both of them scared and terrified by what just happened. This happened 35 years ago, but my mother has never forgotten it. It freaked me out just hearing it. It's scary to think of what could have gone down had the car not driven away when it did. It was the summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up, which was super annoying to me at the time. But we didn't have a choice, and my brother, sister, and I loaded into the car and started the drive. I was about 14 at the time. The drive was uneventful, but there were various delays, and we ended up getting in a lot later than originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting had turned in for the night, and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. Sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. My mom, unfazed, decided she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our favourite spots. She called my dad to see if he could make us some reservations at a hotel in Kennebunkport from NYC while we ate. We were enjoying the lobster while a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the night, go figure. Highest of vacation season in Kennebunkport. The plan was for us to drive to the nearest town and just find somewhere to stay until we could pick up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently, the local had been listening into my mom's conversation and came back over once she got off the phone. I want to say, there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy, clean-cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom he had a big home with a big guest house we were more than welcome to stay at, and his wife wouldn't mind. Immediately, my reaction was, fuck that. No way in the world I was staying in a random dude's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone from Maine, but the streets get creepy. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined this guy was legit. Said he was in finance, my mother was an investment banker, and they chatted enough for my mom to determine he wasn't totally full of it. I called my dad hysterically. He said I was overreacting and that I needed to get out of the city more and accept that sometimes people are just nice. So my brother, sister, and I got back into our car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. The guest house had 2 bedrooms, and instead of them being located in the middle, They were right under the window in each room. Just seemed out of place. Anyway, fast forward. We're all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door, and it's the guy. He said he just wanted to make sure we got settled. Cool. Nice thing to do. About 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, "Thanks, we're good. We'll stop by the house in the morning to say thank you." Fast forward another 30 to 45 minutes. I can't sleep. I'm terrified. We hear this rustling, which is odd because the guest house was nowhere around trees or close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake and look up at the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it's because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked up, there was a male figure, just standing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he was there for. When he walked away, my mom waited a bit, and then told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad on the phone at this point. He was pretty much flipping out at my mom about something, but I didn't hear what. My mom said she was going to put stuff in the car and follow her out. This was around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house, so my mom could return the key and say thanks and get the fuck out of there. However, when we got to the front, all of the lights were off. Not just all the lights, but it looked like no one had been in the home. Porch light, table lamp in front of the windows, everything was black. Also, the two cars were gone. The local's car and what we presume to be his wife's car. After seeing this, my mom, at this point pretty unsettled, said we were leaving and proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been dead-bolted, shut from the inside. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad said rev it, we were in a big SUV, and just get out of there. We drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time. We have never returned back to Maine, and my parents refused to speak about it. I asked a family member one night about it when he was drunk, and all he said was, "They didn't tell you? The actual owners of that house were on vacation." I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with local authorities and figured that out, but never told us. I don't know who that man was or what he was planning that evening. I'm curious as to whether there were any known serial killers or murderers who were in the area at that time, whether travelling through or etc. Update. I spoke with my mom and my dad. They didn't have a ton of details and frankly didn't want to talk about it, but this is what they said. My mom firstly apologized because she knows it was a shitty situation and still thinks she's a horrible mother, which she's not. She's awesome. She didn't have a ton of details, but here are the high-level terms. I asked her what made her suspect something was wrong or what made her put her guard up. I knew something was up when she told us all to sleep in the same bed. Essentially, she said given it was dark and the longer the night went on, she realized that it wasn't a great situation, and that she shouldn't have agreed to it. However, the point that things turned, so to say, was when the guy came by the second time. My mom said his demeanor had done a 180. When he came by to check in the second time, she felt something was off. She described it as somewhat of an edge, both in his attitude and tone of voice. She said he seemed anxious/annoyed, but was trying to come across as a concerned host, if that makes sense. She also said he looked back at the main house a few times, and wasn't really paying attention to her when she was saying, "Yes, everything's fine, thank you," again. All those signs put together made her realize something was off. The way she described it was, there was something beneath his exterior that was coming out that I got a glimpse of and I didn't like it. With respect to the home, and this will probably be relevant to the locals from around the area, and will lead into my next point. She said it seemed like it was being renovated. That might explain why it was unoccupied. She said when she drove in at first, she was just happy we found a place to settle in for the night after a long drive, so she wasn't paying attention to everything as she should have. However, when we were leaving, since she was more on edge and everything was heightened, she started to notice a few things. Firstly, she said it looked like the main house was definitely going through renovations or something of the like, that the exteriors were not that great, and what she saw didn't jive with how the guy described it initially. Neither she nor my father called the cops. She said in hindsight she probably should have, but she was primarily concerned with getting out of there, and after we did, she began to rationalize it away, like, "Come on, it's dark, you're freaking yourself out, calm down, you're tired, it can't possibly be anything bad, you need to lay off the scary movies," type thought pattern. It wasn't until a period of time after that she realized she probably should have alerted the authorities. Also, and this is the point I don't remember, but apparently the home was a lot farther than she was led to believe it was going to be. This makes me think, maybe it wasn't in the main parts of town? I'm not great with geography, and at 14 years old, was definitely not great with it, and she didn't remember exactly where it was. She said she tried, but was focused on following him and wasn't paying attention to the streets exactly. She apologized again and told me, "Don't do that when you have kids." With respect to what my cousin told me about the owners being on vacation, my dad said, "Your cousin's drunk." Okay, that being besides the point, I pressed him a little bit. Apparently how my cousin walked away with that idea is because when my aunt and uncle and mom and dad were talking about it one night, I guess someone floated the idea that maybe the owners were on vacation and this person was house sitting for them. However, my mom and dad both believed that the house was either being renovated or the owners weren't there for whatever reason and it was just vacant. I'm not sure these answers really answer anything, and frankly, they make me feel worse about the whole situation than I did before. I think my parents felt horrible and extremely guilty, and still do, and just try to bury this and move on. About 3 weeks ago, my mom told my brother and I this story. Sally is a lifelong family friend. She would frequently visit her friends and family in Oklahoma. We live in a small town in southern Ontario, Canada. Sally would drive straight 20 hours at least overnight to get from our town to another small town. She did this simply to save money and obviously wanted to arrive as soon as she could. Now that you got the prelude, here's the story. About 30 years ago, she decided to head south on a visit. No big deal, she's done this a few times. So she packs up and heads out. At some point, after driving about 14 to 15 hours, she started getting pretty tired. Being as it was probably the 1980s, it was a little safer. She decided that she would stop at a rest stop to sleep for a little bit and resume her drive first thing in the AM. She parks in a very well lit and busy rest stop. She parks right by the lights and felt at ease because there was an abundance of travellers stopping and going. She gets out for a bathroom break, comes back and settles in her car. About then, an RV pulls up behind her and an elderly couple gets out. The man asks her about coming from Canada. They strike up a little conversation. Nothing odd, the couple talk to Sally for a bit. They tell her they're driving from the south, going north, and just needed to have a sleep for the night. They wanted to talk because they were unsure if a rest stop was okay to stop at, but seeing Sally, they were at ease. They say goodnight and good trip, and the couple went back into their RV. Sally locked her doors up and went to sleep. 2 to 3 hours later, Sally woke up with a really unsettling feeling. She looks around, nothing. A few people going in the stop, parking lights are on. She assumes she's feeling bad because she's tired and the car isn't the best place to sleep in. After 10 minutes, she said that this feeling actually got worse, and it was a jarring, uneasy feeling. She sits back and tries to shrug it off. This didn't work, and apparently she had every red alarm and instinct telling her that she needs to go. She panics, starts her car, and peels off. She doesn't care where, she just knew she had to get away from there. So about 20 miles down the road, she finds a motel and a gas station. She decides to see if she could get a room for what little money she had. She converses with the person in charge. He cuts her a deal as he doesn't want to see a young woman driving alone at night. She gets a key, pops in her hotel room and sleeps for the night. No issues, all in peace. Around 9 AM, she wakes up, showers, changes clothes and decides to relax for a few. She turns on the TV, and what was on it actually gave me chills. There was a breaking news story about an elderly couple being killed in the middle of the night. The news shows the RV that Sally was parked next to. Same exact spot, same exact rest stop. And she sees the fast food drink cup she dropped on accident that rolled under her car. Sometime during the night, a man broke into their RV and killed him, then left, presumably right before Sally had left. The man was never caught. Sally has since stopped at hotels for the night and avoided rest stops. My dad was a journalist for most of his life and is now an author. This is one of his stories from hiking the Appalachian Trail. My dad hiked the trail mostly by himself, but would occasionally run into other hikers and spend a few days hiking and camping with them. He said it was always a pleasant experience and he made a lot of really good friends. He met Jeff and Molly, a really nice couple, and began hiking with them for a couple of days. After camping with them and becoming fairly good friends, they went their separate ways as my dad pulled us ahead of them. He was about 2 days further down the trail from them when he stopped at a town to get some real food and relax. That's when he found out that Jeff and Molly had been murdered in their sleep by a stranger on the trail. Molly had been raped and was stabbed repeatedly throughout the process, and Jeff had been shot. I think that it's absolutely terrifying that my dad had just camped with them. I am a 28-year-old male living in the Deep South. I am now a functional, medicated, and therapy-attending paranoid schizophrenic. However, I wasn't always this way, and this story comes from a time before I even knew what was wrong. It was around April 2007 when this happened. I had just come out of a painful divorce, and she had taken all of my friends away from me in the process. I was obviously trying to reach out to anyone I could, but I had severe codependency issues that I didn't know how to address. Anyway, I found myself wandering the game section of my local Walmart, as I'm still a gamer at heart, and had to see what was available. Things were going alright, and I seemed to be in control of myself. Then he appeared. This poor, unsuspecting soul started talking to me about World of Warcraft, which I happened to play. I perked up at this point, thinking I could make a new friend that hadn't been taken from me. We made casual jokes and talked about the new expansion. I can't remember if it had just come out or if it was soon to come. At this point, his mother, he was probably 18 to 20, judging by his appearance, came by and took him to another aisle. He didn't say goodbye, he just walked off. And just like that, our conversation was true. Well, in my mind, we had made a connection. We had bonded. In my sick, twisted state, I thought he would appreciate if we hung out for a while. So I followed him. I made a point to casually stroll down the aisles that he happened to visit and strike up conversations with him about different things, jokes I can't remember. I could tell he was getting creeped out by the third time I did this. He started getting this deer in headlights look every time he saw me, and it was starting to become a horror story, though in my eyes it was perfectly natural. At some point, however, his fight or flight must have kicked in, because when I appeared, as soon as I opened my mouth, he screamed, "Leave me alone!" and stormed off, dragging his mother as quickly as he possibly could. This was a wake-up call for me, that I was being severely creepy and also a stalker. I realized that this could very well be the behavior that caused my divorce in the first place. I checked myself into a mental institution soon after, and got the help that I needed. I'm now significantly better, and my relationships with people have improved greatly. I now have good friends and a loving fiancé. Not all creepers mean to be creepy. Some of us just need the proper psychiatric help. On behalf of all the unknowing and good-intentional creepers out there, I humbly and sincerely apologize for our behavior. It doesn't make it forgivable, but I hope it does give some context as to what goes on in the mind of a creeper. Thank you for your time.